Hello and welcome to Games from Folktales, a podcast that mixes historical research and tabletop role-playing settings. I'm your host, Timothy Ferguson. This episode, Frostiana, Stories from the Little Ice Age. Sometimes the Thames River in London freezes over. This was more common in the 18th century, when temperatures were a little colder than they are now, and the bridge over the river had pylons more closely placed. People held markets on the frozen river, and during the final Frost Fair, in 1814, a book was printed on the ice. I've gone through it for plot hooks. Ars Magica is a game that's peculiarly good for environmental puzzles. In combat-heavy games, the question of how you stop a village from starving due to frost has only one obvious answer. You kill the thing causing the frost. In Ars Magica, you can instead let the player characters work through a series of challenges using the many tools they have available. The interest is not if the creature will eat them, their success is assumed. The interest is how they will solve the problem, what the effect of their choices will be, and how this develops the characters. This is sometimes called competence porn gaming. If you want an ultimate villain for this, then there are obvious ones available in Ars Magica supplements. Your final battle could be with the Snow Queen, some frost giants, the Muspelly, or an army of the dog-headed fairies who bring winter with them. This article leaves that to you. It's about the non-combat stories that can be told about the Great Frost. Some events for the characters to react to. 27th of December. A great fog rolls across the land on the 27th of December and lasts until the 3rd of January. This prevents travel except at the slowest of rates, perhaps 3 miles per day. Messages can't get through, so it's a perfect time for people to settle scores and commit crimes. Messengers go missing and need to be retrieved. People accidentally walk into rivers or ride off roads and need rescue. Horsemen collide, which could cover murder or theft. People travelling the streets need to carry torches, and those who were out before the fog rolled in have great trouble getting home. The streets are full of frightened people yelling, "Who is coming? Mind me, take care," and some of the voices say worse things, but it's harder to pin those ones down. You could have a sonic will-o'-the-wisp begging for aid and leading people into trouble. Rain then falls that freezes, and it makes the leaves and branches heavy. The slightest wind can break off a branch that weighs dozens of pounds. Even a leaf can cut you when it's coated in a thick layer of frost. People freeze to death in the snow or are orphaned, and this creates a lot of ghosts. Big chunks of ice start appearing in the river. These crash about each other dangerously and cluster about the bridge. As the tide turns, it begins to push the ice back up the river, and so the ice coming down and the ice being forced up block the river to traffic. Magi need to ensure a shipment goes through without being detected. During a high tide, a ship can't find an anchorage, so it ties off on a column at a public house. This building is pulled down when there's a sudden shift in the ice. A character seeing what is happening could save dozens of people just by splitting the rope, but magical aid might save the vessel as well. The 3rd of January. 2 days of constant snow are followed by a short thaw, which turns everything to mud. The river floods, the ice chunks smash into the wooden houses and commercial buildings by the river. Icicles a 1.5 yards long form, and at least one kills a man by impaling him when it falls from an eave. Markets empty out, so supplies for the Covenant are harder to find. Water is scarce, wells are frozen, and fuel to melt snow is becoming expensive. If you have no water, your laboratory score goes well down, and the Covenant has a negative environmental modifier on aging rolls. Many people die, but the ground is too hard to bury them in, and this generates even more ghosts, with very simple final requests. Since each one of these has a little mentum viz, this is good business for the unscrupulous. 10th of January. The Thames freezes hard. Skating occurs, because this is later than 1220, and a woman pops her kneecap and some people fall through the ice. Rich people come for a sticky beak as the ice gets more solid. In some of the great frosts, the rivers freeze, but beneath the ice they keep pouring fresh water out into the sea, which also freezes, blocking harbours either with sheets or with jagged chunks. Some captains report there is a sheet of unstable ice for miles from the British coastline. Ships in the harbours are ground apart and wrecked. Their cargoes are lost. Fishing fleets cannot do their work. The 20th of January. The weight of the snow on the roofs of the houses makes them unsafe, so it's shoveled into the roads. This fills the streets, making them impassable in many areas. The snowdrifts around London reach 16 feet, too high even for oxen. Fuel gets so expensive because there's no way to bring it in. The city disperses funds to buy fuel for the poor and offers a bounty on every fish brought to market. There's a heap of money to be made here, or a lot of people to rescue. 22nd of January. Sledges first appear on the river, hauling goods which would usually travel by boat or road. The first people to break the famine and the fuel shortage make good money or get political favours. During a later frost fair, some men wagon in a ton of Welsh coal as a gift for the Prince of Wales, and this gives them the royal favour. Magi might mount a similar show for their courtier pawns. Street sweepers have started making mounds of snow and rubbish on the ice. All the filth that usually goes into the sewers needs to just be piled up in the only clear space, which is on the river. Demons of filth rejoice, and some make elemental bodies from these towers of excrement. Processions start. Quote, "The watermen and fishermen with a peter boat in mourning, and the carpenters, bricklayers, etc., with their tools and utensils in mourning, walked through the streets in large bodies, imploring relief for their own and families' necessities." End quote. Magi could recruit a lot of workmen cheap for a covenant at a time like this. 25th of January. The first shops appear on the ice selling liquor. A fair springs up. The next day, people are selling utensils and toys marked hastily with commemorative inscriptions. Bear baiting, pig and sheep roasting occur, swings, bookstalls, dancing in a barge, sutting booths, that is, eating booths, skittles is played. The watermen charge an entrance fee. There's a run on the bank for small coins. This again requires coins to be a regular part of the economy, arguably possible in 13th century London, but not in many other places. A light snow occurs the next day. Do the Magi intervene to keep the fair going? Some people deliberately stay out on the ice. Quote, "The effect of moonlight was singularly picturesque and beautiful." End quote. This makes the sight even more interesting to fairies. Fairies are drawn to the pain of those who can see but not participate in the festivities. Quote, "The miserable inhabitants that dwelt in houses on both sides of the river during these thoughtless exhibitions were mainly of them experiencing the extreme misery, destitute of employment, their children whining for the want of bread." End quote. Late February, the ice breaks up. Before it cleaves off, warning sounds of cracking come from deep within the ice. A large chunk detached itself with people on it who needed saving. A couple of other notes from the Frostiana. St. Petersburg Fair. St. Petersburg regularly has frost fairs. It's the cheapest period for food in St. Petersburg, as the frozen river provides cheap transport for goods from far-off provinces. There are pyramids of cows, sheep, hogs, fowls, butter, fish, and eggs, all, to quote, "stiffened into granite." Fish have their living colours, but beasts are skinned and stacked so that it looks like they're climbing over each other. Frozen meat is chopped off like wood. Initiation. A woman survived buried in a snow cave for 8 days. The snow was thin enough that the light of the sun permeated her cave, such that she could read the almanac in her pocket. She melted snow in her mouth to avoid death by thirst, and when she heard the church bells, she tore off the frozen branch of a tree and used it to smash out into the open air and call for help. She then fainted and lost a few toes to frostbite. This sounds like an initiation similar to that of the drowned men in realms of power magic. So there's one for history buffs and my fellow Doctor Who fans. I wrote this just after watching the episode called Thin Ice. Next week, a short episode on Nozick's experience machine.